A man rescued an unconscious woman lying on a snowy road. But what really shook his heart was the look in her eyes the moment she opened them. She had no name, no past. She just said, Mila, and from that moment, their destinies changed. But Lucas knew neither who she was, nor the storm that was coming after her. If you love getting lost in stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Lucas Weber's tired hands were on the steering wheel. Inside his truck, it was completely silent except for the engine's hum. That day, he had just finished his third shift. In his mind, there was still the list of hourly deliveries, the ingredients for the sandwich he'd make for his daughter Sophie that evening, and the echo of a broken dream from the night before. As he watched the yellowing headlights along the road, his eyelids got heavy, but something deep inside him kept him awake. Maybe it was a dad instinct, not just to survive, but to stay awake to keep someone else going. While the wipers fought desperately on the windshield, something caught his attention in the right lane. In the foggy weather, an SUV had slightly veered off the road, its hazard lights blinking like a trembling heart. For a moment, he thought about driving on. It was late, there was no signal on his phone, and Sophie was waiting for him. But then he remembered that look, the quiet, shaky question his daughter asked last week. Dad, why do you always help others? Lucas's answer was simple. Because one day, we might be the ones who need help. He pulled the truck to the side, grabbed his flashlight, and pulled his hood over his head. Even though snow had piled on his jacket shoulders, he moved forward. Each step felt like a decision pressed into the snow. When he reached the SUV, the door was slightly open. A faint steam rose from inside, but behind the steam, a young woman was leaning on the steering wheel. Her face was pale, lips purple. He lowered the flashlight, pressed his fingers to her wrist. No pulse. Fatigue and cold were suddenly forgotten. Adrenaline pumped through his veins. Without hesitation, he opened the door fully, gently pulled her out, and carefully laid her on the soft snow. His mind raced. The phone didn't work, help was miles away, and time was slipping through his fingers. It had been years since his CPR training, but some things never fade. On his knees, he started rhythmic chest compressions. 1, 2, 3. His hands didn't shake as he counted inside, but his heart did. Every push was hope. Every breath was like a prayer calling her back. He didn't know who she was, but he did everything because in front of him was not a person, but a life. Minutes passed, or maybe only seconds. Time was distorted. Then, something happened. The woman suddenly coughed. With a deep, hoarse breath, air filled her lungs. Her eyelids fluttered. Lucas froze on his knees for a moment. That moment was like spring in the middle of winter. Her eyes opened, blurry at first, then focused, and she looked at Lucas. That look was indescribable. It was neither thanks nor surprise. It was more like the trust of someone drowning taking their first step onto land. Where am I? Her voice was almost a whisper. You're safe, Lucas said, taking off his jacket and covering her. You passed out. I found you on the road. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. My name is... She hesitated. Then she smiled softly. Mila. Just Mila. There was a secret behind this simple introduction, but Lucas didn't think about it at that moment. He carried Mila to his truck, turned on the seat heater, started the engine. A random radio station began playing, but none of it broke the silence of that moment. Mila looked out the window, not at her reflection, but at her past. Lucas looked not at the road ahead, but at the sudden change sitting next to him. No one realized yet, but that night, not just one life had been saved. That night, fate had changed its course. Mila's eyes stared blankly out the truck window while Lucas held the steering wheel tight. He kept turning back, trying to figure out exactly what had happened, but in that moment, he was sure of one thing. This woman didn't just need help, she needed time and trust too. And Lucas knew that better than anything, because he'd carried that same silence inside himself for years. Without judging, without forcing anyone, just standing by their side. Sometimes, that was the greatest form of love for Lucas. On the way, he wanted to talk to Mila a few times, but her tired eyes looked like she was using all her energy just to breathe. Finally, they stopped at a small clinic nearby. Lucas had to carry Mila because she was too weak to walk on her own. When they went inside, the nurse frowned. Emergency? She asked, but Lucas just nodded and said, Found her on the road. Mila had closed her eyes again and rested her head on Lucas's shoulder. That scene silenced the entire waiting room for a few seconds. Mila didn't register her name. Eva, she said quietly to Lucas. Just right, Eva. It was clear she was trying to hide something, but Lucas didn't ask. Every word from her lips seemed carefully chosen. The doctors said low blood pressure, fatigue, mild hypothermia. But when asked the real reason, Mila looked away. I'm tired, she said simply. For a long time. Lucas thought about how many times he'd given that same answer in his own life and decided not to ask more. When they got home, the kitchen light was still on. Little Sophie was looking at colorful planets she'd drawn on the kitchen table. Her face lit up when she saw her dad, but her eyes asked about Mila. Lucas nodded softly. I helped someone on the road, he said. She might stay here for a while. Sophie blinked and nodded, just like her mom used to, asking no questions, just accepting. When Mila lay down in the old guest room, she was still shaking. Lucas gave her a blanket and stepped back. But as Mila left the room, she whispered, thank you. Not just for the help, but for not rushing. That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. In his mind, it wasn't just Mila's trembling voice. It was the familiar exhaustion on her face. Those expressionless, yet deeply meaningful eyes. There was a darkness inside her that felt strangely familiar. The next morning, the sun shyly rose through the clouds. Mila was still asleep. Lucas went downstairs and made Sophie a toast, tiptoeing to keep the silence. But Sophie asked, who is she, Dad? Lucas didn't know what to say. A traveler, he finally said. I guess someone who's lost her way. Sophie blinked, then took a bite of her toast. I hope she finds her way here, she said with the seriousness of a regular kid. Lucas flinched for a moment. Sometimes kids could break all the grown-up word games with a single sentence. Mila only came out of her room around noon. She still looked tired but could stand on her own. You've lost your way, Lucas said. But this isn't a map. Mila smiled faintly. Sometimes it's not a map you need, but a stop. Just a breath's pause. Then her eyes caught the photo on the wall, Sophie and her mother, at an old birthday party. Mila approached, didn't touch the frame with her fingers, but stared at the picture. Your wife? She asked. Lucas just nodded. A few years ago, he said. Suddenly, they both stayed quiet for a while. Then Mila said, just let me rest a bit. I'll leave tomorrow. Lucas couldn't hold back a voice inside him. People who talk about leaving often want to stay. But he didn't say it out loud. He just went to the kitchen. Want some coffee? He asked. And right then, something broke the silence. Mila said yes. That simple word was maybe the first step taken in that house. A stranger, a guest, maybe someone who came with a lie, but also someone who looked like the beginning of a brand new life. And inside Lucas, something was starting to grow that he hadn't fully understood yet. Maybe this story didn't start with just saving Mila. Maybe Lucas was being saved from inside, without even realizing it. On the morning of the third day, Mila stepped out onto the porch, sipping her steaming coffee from a mug, while Lucas quietly watched her. The dark circles under her eyes had faded a bit. Her shoulders were still tense, but seemed a little softer now. The sun had lightened winter's heaviness. The air was still chilly, but that deep, gnawing darkness inside had lifted somewhat. Mila's hair was messy, her head slightly bowed, like she still didn't quite have the strength to face the world. But she was there. She hadn't left. And that meant more than Lucas expected. I can take you to town today, Lucas said slowly, taking off his glove. If you want to get a few things, maybe book a hotel room. Mila nodded but looked away. Maybe. But first, I want to thank you. Really. Lucas said nothing, just bowed his head. He didn't need words to accept the thanks. When they got to town, Mila was quiet but alert. She scanned every shop, every sign, every stray dog with her eyes. Like she was searching for something. Maybe her past, maybe her future, maybe herself. She bought a few basics at a small market. A toothbrush, a t-shirt, a notebook, and a pen. Watching this simple shopping, Lucas realized she was still carrying her biggest burden. No matter what she bought, nothing made it lighter. Then Mila's voice broke the silence. Can you show me a workplace? Lucas raised his eyebrows. Work? Mila didn't look away. Doing nothing tires me more. If I don't use my hands, my thoughts get me into trouble. Lucas felt like he'd heard that before, from his own youth or the last words his wife spoke in her hospital room. That's when Lucas said something he hadn't thought to say before. I've got a small workshop behind the house. I fix vehicles. I actually need help. I'm behind on some orders. Maybe if you want. Mila turned to him. Who said I know about cars? Lucas smiled slightly. When someone does what no one expects from you, That's often the best answer. The next day, Mila came to the workshop wearing an old work coverall, her hair tied back. That morning at breakfast, Sophie had asked, "Dad, can Mila stay with us?" Lucas hadn't answered, but his eyes said yes. Because Mila's hands didn't shake when she tightened a bolt. She wasn't uncomfortable touching greasy engine parts. On the contrary, it was like those rusty steel pieces put something inside her back in order. In the afternoon, while Mila leaned over an engine block, Lucas went to a small table in the corner of the workshop and pulled out an old album. A few photos of Sophie with her mother, childhood memories, dusty but vivid shots. He didn't hand the album to Mila, but clearly showed it was there. And Mila noticed. She glanced sideways, said nothing, just lightly placed her hand on the table. It wasn't a conversation, but a moment of acceptance and awareness. Just then, a motor sound came from outside. Usually, the vehicles passing in front of the workshop were ordinary, but this was different. A low, powerful engine. Then it stopped. Lucas went out, Mila followed. A sleek black car. Tinted windows. A clean but special license plate. The man who got out, dressed in a gray suit, didn't fit the town's vibe. His steps were sharp, his face hard. When he saw Mila, he paused. His eyes narrowed. "Mila," he said. Lucas stepped in immediately. "Who are you?" The man pressed his lips. "I've been looking for Mila. She's been unreachable for days." Mila's face went pale. She froze for a moment, then whispered, almost barely, "Leo." The man nodded. "You need to come back. Everyone's waiting for you. The board is impatient. Things can't move without you." Lucas noticed Mila sinking deeper with every word from Leo. "Mila, are you a CEO?" he asked, voice low, heart tight. Mila didn't answer. She just looked away. Leo nodded firmly. "Yes, Mila Sommer, chairwoman of the board. And right now, I wonder what you're doing here." At that moment, Lucas felt a pang inside. Not just Mila's past, but what they told her was also being questioned. The woman who said just Mila had hidden not only her name, but her identity. As a shadow fell over all those honest days, only one question echoed in Lucas's mind. Which one is real? The man who found her in the snow, or this stranger standing in front of him now? And Mila trembled for the first time, because her past was no longer just chasing her, it was standing right in front of her. Leo's arrival didn't just reveal Mila's identity, it also started a new silence inside Lucas. It was like a motor stopped inside him, wires loosened. Until that day, the sound of the hammer, the tightening of bolts, Sophie's laughter, all stopped at once. Everything had a sound now, but no meaning. Mila stood a few steps behind, not even looking at Lucas. There was no shame in her eyes, only fear. It was like she realized at that moment she wasn't just caught. She also had nowhere to hide. As Leo walked sharply toward the car, he turned to Mila and said, "I'm giving you 2 days. Either you come back, or they find you." That threatening sentence, whose meaning wasn't clear, sent chills through Lucas. When the man got into the car, Mila still didn't move. Her eyes were still on the ground, her hands clenched tight into fists. As the car's engine faded away, a wind blew. But what came with that wind wasn't cold, it was the past. Lucas quietly turned and went back into the workshop. Mila followed, but said nothing. At that moment, they didn't know where words could fit. For a few minutes, all there was the sound of the wind moving among the vehicle parts. Finally, Mila parted her lips. "I didn't lie," she said. "I just couldn't tell everything." Lucas answered without looking up. "You even changed your name." Mila watched the worn coverall hanging on the wall. "Yes, because when I lived as Evelyn Sommer, I couldn't breathe. I survived only as Mila." That sentence pierced through Lucas's walls for the first time. But there were still too many questions he couldn't answer. "So why did you come here?" he asked, his voice low but firm. "Why not anywhere else? But my home, my daughter, my life." Mila bowed her head. "That night, I wasn't running to ask for help. I was running not to die. And then I saw you. In your eyes, I saw for the first time that someone was looking at me not as Evelyn, but as someone. Maybe that's why I wanted to stay." That night, Lucas was angry at himself, not Mila, because part of his heart still wanted to trust her, while the other felt that trust as betrayal. Sophie asked nothing. She just made a new drawing in her notebook. A woman and a man standing under a giant pine tree, a shadow in the space between them. And inside the shadow, a heart, broken, but still beating. The next morning, when Lucas came down to the workshop, Mila was already there. Her hands were stained with paint. She was drawing something on the side wall of the workshop. "What are you doing?" Lucas asked in his usual harsh tone. Mila spoke without turning around. "I wanted to leave a mark. Before I go." Lucas felt a tremble inside. He couldn't say, "You don't have to leave," because he still didn't know what was real and what was escape. But then Mila turned. Her eyes were full of tears, but her gaze was steady. "You save a life, Lucas. But sometimes the past of that life tries to pull you in. I brought my past with me. I've been a burden to you." Lucas nodded. "You owe me nothing. But I owe myself. I want to know the truth. Everything." And that evening, Mila started to tell it. Yes, she was a CEO. But not just of a company. She was the bearer of invisible chains behind $1 million empire. Her brother Leo was the only one trying to take control of the company. After their mother's death, she had left half the company to him. But in the fine print of the will, there was another burden for Mila, a social responsibility project. But investors didn't like it. Mila had tried to make her own way, but was quietly pushed aside by the board. So she left. But she didn't run. She tried to breathe. After she finished telling, there was silence. This time Lucas didn't ask. Mila continued. "You were the first to see me, Lucas. The real me. And I didn't want to drag you into a story. But you became that story." Lucas spoke without taking his eyes off her. "Maybe life sends silent writers to those who can't write their own stories." Mila smiled faintly. "Then you're my sentence." The next morning, Mila was at the doorstep, putting on her shoes. She was leaving. At least, that's how it seemed. But Lucas called after her. "Is it over?" Mila froze. "What?" Lucas looked into her eyes. "What started with you? Here. This. Hope. The things we fixed." Mila looked down. "I'm afraid if I stay, I'll lose again." Lucas stepped closer. "And if you leave, we'll never have had it." That's when Sophie stepped in. Holding up her drawing, she said, "I'm going to hang this on the wall. Because we found the missing piece. You can stay if you want, Mila. I know you now." Mila's eyes filled with tears. The first thing to break was her tears. Then she stepped back. But this time, not to leave, to stay. For the first time, she thought not about the past, but where she belonged. Because even truths buried under the snow can melt in the sun one day. As Mila waited at the doorstep, Lucas looked into her eyes. This time, he didn't ask anything. He just kept walking beside her. Sometimes the best way to hold on to people is to stay close without squeezing too tight. That morning, they ate breakfast quietly. Sophie noticed Mila smiled when she accidentally put too much milk in her coffee, and that smile softened something inside Lucas. Outside, spring's early chill still lingered, but inside the house, warmth had started. Identities, pasts, secrets. Yes, they were all there. But now, a brand new reality was built on top of them. And it wasn't made of dreams. It was earned with sweat, tears, and heartbeats. On her way back to the workshop, Mila was carrying some old brushes. "I need to finish the wall," she said. "If I leave things half done inside me, they grow." Lucas nodded. He was carrying a lot of unfinished things too, but for the first time, he felt close to completing one. Mila drew a tree at the top of the mural. 3 letters hung from its roots. L, M, S. Sophie noticed right away. "That's us," she said. "Lucas, Mila, Sophie." Lucas smiled softly but said nothing. He had no intention of breaking that moment. That afternoon, a few people from town stopped by. A few who already knew Mila's real identity had recognized her from a short news story in the paper. But no one asked questions. They just came with things that needed fixing: an old chair, a rusty stove, a broken bike. One woman quietly handed over the stove, then turned to Mila and said, "If everyone judged you by your past, no one would be here. This town has accepted you. We see you as Mila." That night, Lucas opened a drawer in the workshop he hadn't touched in years. Inside was a note his wife Lena had written last. "One day, someone will come. They'll help you breathe again. Don't feel guilty. Because I loved you, and leaving you doesn't mean that love lessened." Lucas's hands trembled. When he folded that note and put it away years ago, he hadn't believed he could truly connect with someone again. But now, the brush marks Mila quietly left, the hopes Sophie planted in her heart, and the stirring he felt inside himself, whispered otherwise. The next morning, an unexpected visitor came. This time it wasn't Leo, an elderly woman in a black suit. She entered the workshop leaning on her cane. "Is Mila Sommer here?" she asked. Mila stepped forward, head bowed slightly. That's me. The woman handed over an envelope. As your mother's former lawyer, this is your right. Mila took the envelope and opened it. Inside was just a revised will. Their mother had left her shares to Mila at the last minute, but with one condition. She had to set up a community service project within a year. Mila smiled quietly, because that foundation had already been formed in her mind. Sophie's Foundation, a center to give hope to single-parent children and lives that can be repaired. That evening, Lucas and Mila sat in the audience for Sophie's school presentation on a small stage. Sophie stepped up holding a drawing. This is our garage, she said. But it's not just a place where cars get fixed. Hearts get fixed here too. Sometimes you don't need roads or maps to find someone. Sometimes a wrong turn leads you home. The crowd fell silent. Then applause started. Tears ran down Mila's cheeks as Lucas held her hand. It wasn't a romantic gesture. It was a moment of touching a life. Mila turned her head and said, I didn't choose this house, but my heart chose it. That night Lucas thought a lot. He knew Leo was still a threat. But this time, instead of running, he needed a plan. Because he realized he had to stand behind not only Mila's life, but his own too. The next morning, he turned to Mila and said, Take back your name. Go back as Evelyn Sommer and start this project. But on one condition. Come back. Because from now on, every future plan I make has you in it. Mila didn't answer. She just hugged him. This time it wasn't just a thank you. It was a hug of commitment. Not with her eyes, but with a decision deep in her chest. Okay, she said. But I'm only coming back for a name. My heart stays here. And that day, they started talking not just about the past, but about the future too. 3 weeks later, Mila came back. This time, she didn't crawl through snow-covered roads or arrive like a shadow running from herself. She wore a simple coat, and in her eyes was not tiredness, but determination. Lucas was waiting at the workshop door when she got out of the car. He held an oily rag, his face calm but warm. There was nothing left unsaid between them. No unspoken whys, no knots of what-ifs stuck in their throats. There was only now, and now was strong. I kept my promise, Mila said. I took back my name. I made the press statement. But this time, I said something else. Lucas raised his eyebrows. Mila finished. Now, my job isn't just running a company. It's showing people they can be fixed. Those words shook Lucas inside. Because a dream he hadn't even dared imagine, Mila spoke for him. Then she handed over a folder. These are the official documents for the foundation. It's named after Sophie. My voice shook when I told her about it. Because this kid didn't just give me a life, she gave me a second chance. That evening, a new sign was hung on the empty lot right next to the workshop. Handmade wooden. It read, Holloway and Sommer, Restoration, Hope, New Beginnings below. In small handwritten letters, it said, Anyone wanting to be repaired is welcome inside. The town gathered to celebrate this new partnership. No one treated Mila like a CEO. The kids who knew her called her Mural Mila. An elderly couple brought an old chair and asked, Can we fix this together? Mila bent down, took the chair in her hands, and said, Yes, just like ourselves. At the end of that night, Lucas sat on the porch sipping tea when Mila came beside him. Sophie was there too, barefoot, holding her sketchbook. You know, Dad, the girl said, maybe everyone has a broken piece in their life. But when we're together, those pieces look beautiful. Lucas smiled softly. Mila rested her head on his shoulder. And for the first time, without any need for explanation, complete peace filled the silence. Because now everything was in its right place. Mila had made peace with her past. Lucas had learned to trust again. Sophie felt whole, not broken. And a few weeks later, a small news item appeared in the paper. Former CEO leads a new life in a small town. Holloway and Sommer became a place not just for repairs, but for hope, trust, and new beginnings. This was not the place Mila came back to leave. It was the place she chose to stay. Lucas burned the letter in that old drawer. Honoring the past, he left it behind. And Sophie, she kept drawing a new page every morning. Nothing was missing anymore. The story had started with a rescue, but ended with belonging. A broken heart, a quiet man, and a woman who deserved a second chance without even realizing it, were finally repaired. And now they knew, some things can't be rebuilt, but some people are reborn together. If this story touched your heart, and you believe second chances aren't just fairy tales, but real in life too, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. because the next story might just be yours.